Happy Sunday, everyone. If you are new to the channel, my name is Alfred Cromwell. And first, I want to thank every single individual who has subscribed in recent days. And if you don't know what this channel is about, we do both mathematics. I am interested in mathematical education, but also pure mathematics. Let me be clear about that. But also, every Sunday, I do a Sunday, time permitting, I do a Sunday moral message. So if you are new to the channel, I generally like to share from a Christian perspective also on Sundays some kind of moral message, time permitting. But I am addressing myself today to you young people in particular, but really all ages. But most of my audience, praise God, is composed of young people between the ages of, I've seen anywhere between the ages of 16 and into the 30s. Uh, and so you really are the heirs of a tumultuous age. You are the majority of you coming to this channel. You are seekers of truth in a world that is beset by confusion and pride. So, if you may please, if you give me please your permission, if I may have your permission to lend me your ears, that I may unfold before you a vision that is not forged in the fires of transient fancy, but we have to be tempered by the steady hand of tradition and the patient wisdom of ages long past. Today's message is not going to be, it will be surprising to many because unfortunately, a lot of young people do not even have a world vision as to how things are supposed to work and why they should work a certain way. So it is an age where many cry liberty as though liberty were the mere ability to do as one pleases, unshackled from all duty, unbound by any law, but the fleeting whim of desire. And yet, what liberty is this that leads not to the exaltation of man, but to his descent into folly and despair? What freedom can you speak of? What freedom is this that robs the soul of its dignity and the state of its order, reducing it all to a chaotic theater of competing passions? So we have to speak plainly. True liberty is no wild horse to be ridden by every fool who fancies himself a master. It is a noble steed, trained and bridled by the reins of justice and guided by the charioteer of virtue. Without order, liberty is an illusion, a mask worn by the spirit of anarchy and self-worship. So we have to consider the natural constitution of mankind. We are not a solitary island. We are a citizen born into a family, a community, a sacred polity. Every single one of you, whether you want to admit it or not, have some kind of origin. And to deny this is to deny the very root of our being. For man is created not merely to exist, but to live in harmony with his fellows, under the governance of laws higher than the fleeting decree of any tyrant or mob. And it is this governance that I wish to extol today. This sacred hierarchy by which the divine order is reflected in human society. The family, that primary school of virtue and the cradle of civilizations, demands the steadfast presence of the father, the nurturing care of a mother, and the reverent upbringing of the children. Not as mere biological happenstance, but as the very foundation of moral life. Beyond the hearth lies the domain of the commonwealth. That's where you have rulers, chosen by providence and invested with authority that should enact laws for the common good, to protect the weak and foster the flourishing of all. And this authority is no mere human contrivance, but a sacred trust, a reflection on earth of the heavenly order. And here I must caution you against the seductive but deadly folly that imagines the individual as a sovereign unto himself, free from all ties save those he chooses to acknowledge. And such arrogance is the folly of the modern age, a poisonous fruit born of the tree of pride and reason severed from faith. So we have to then speak of order and the true liberty. We have to discuss the sacred bonds of society. So let us reflect then on the strange doctrine so fashionable in our day, that man is but a self-contained atom, floating alone upon the sea of existence, accountable only to himself and answerable to no one. I know for a fact many of you have seen people like that. They say, I don't answer to anybody except myself. He's not going to tell me what to do. And this notion is the most thorough denial of human nature. It is an insult to the very design that God has impressed upon us. Because if man were truly a solitary sovereign, why then would he hunger for fellowship? Why would he yearn for community and labor tirelessly, the vast majority of men especially, to build families and nations? Unless you were called by God, some of us were called by God to dedicate our lives to a different kind of mission. But I am speaking of the vast majority of people are called to create and raise families. And why does the heart rebel against the cold indifference of the marketplace and crave the warmth of a shared table? And such desires are not accidental. They are the echo of a divine order, the murmuring of a voice greater than reason alone can command. And yet the modern spirit, enamored with its own cleverness, we've never lived in such a narcissistic age as today. Even though narcissism is as old as the hills, but never has it been as celebrated as today. But they would have you believe that all of this, family, authority, community, they call it an oppressive chain forged to enslave the individual. Cast off these fetters, it cries, and seize your freedom. But I ask you, what freedom can there be in a man who is cast adrift, bereft of anchors, lost in a tempest of his own passions? Indeed, when every man is a law unto himself, what then becomes of justice? when bonds dissolve, who shall care for the widow, the orphan, the aged, the sick, the needy? When every soul pursues only his own desires, what remains in that but a wilderness of chaos where the strongest prey upon the weak and the meek are trampled beneath the march of selfishness. And herein lies the great paradox of our time. Those who decry, no, I don't want tradition, I don't care about authority, in the name of freedom, they wind up enslaving society to the tyranny of confusion and moral decay. The so-called enlightenment of the self-made man, that is really not self-made at all, but I'm being very generous. It often reveals itself to be the darkening of all that is noble and true. Do you all really believe? Are some of you so naive, so deluded to believe that, for example, the men who rule America today, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, do you really believe that they are self-made men? If you do, you are an idiot. You are a fool. You are ignorant. And yet, amid the whirlwind of falsehood, there stands a sanctuary, an unchanging truth that declares the goods of the earth are not the private hoards of an individual. But really, if you are talking about nations, the common heritage of a nation. And this sacred principle calls us not to grasp selfishly, but to be generous in the Christian meaning of the word. Not to hoard, but to steward wisely. And that is what our country believed until the beginning of the 20th century. You even had leaders, corporate leaders like Ford, who wanted his workers to do better, to be well off, to at least have some sense of security. It demands of rulers that they govern not as despots, but as fathers of their people. That is why true Americans call the founders of America the founding fathers. That they regulate commerce and industry, not for the enrichment of unnamed corporations, but for the sustenance of the country as a whole. That they cherish the dignity of labor. That they provide just wages and protect the family from the corrosive forces of neglect and avarice, which is anti-Christian. And such governance is no mere political whim, but the moral imperative of a society ordered to the common good. It is the task of a righteous government to intervene righteously in certain economic affairs, to temper the excesses of unfettered competition, and to secure for every citizen a measure of security and peace. Does this sound like tyranny? No, it is the very framework upon which liberty itself is built. For what is liberty? Ask yourself this question. What is liberty without security, without justice, without a home in which the soul may find rest? The unregulated market, by the way, the market is certainly not free. There is no such thing in today's America or world as a so-called free market. And those of you who are free marketeers, I hope that you're not so naive to believe that there is truly a free market. But when it is left to its own devices, it's a savage monster. And only the guiding hand of moral authority can transform it into a servant of human dignity as God had intended. Let's look at a famous Bible verse, by the way, that reflects such a spirit. It's in the book of Proverbs. And so we have to discuss the order in true liberty on the sacred bonds. And I was recently thinking of Proverbs chapter 31, one of my favorites. A little bit before verses 8 through 9, it's interesting because it says, give strong drink. And I'm thinking, by the way, the Bible that I read is the King James Version. But it says in verse 6, Proverbs 31, verse 6, give strong drink unto him that is ready to perish, and wine unto those that be of heavy hearts. Let him drink and forget his poverty, and remember his misery no more. It's an interesting verse, isn't it? It makes me feel a little bit more comfortable when I'm having that red wine every day in my dinners. But really, Proverbs chapter 31, verses 8 through 9 say, open thy mouth for the dumb. That's D-U-M-B, by the way, for those of you sensitive types. It's called dumb. There are dumb people out there. In the cause of all such as are appointed to destruction. Open thy mouth, judge righteously, and plead the cause of the poor and needy. You have Isaiah chapter 1, verse 17. Isaiah 1:17. It says, learn to do well. It says to seek judgment and relieve the oppressed. He uses that word. Judge the fatherless. Plead for the widow. So we cannot just be content with abstract principles alone. We have to consider the concrete realities that confront us. The suffering of the laborer, whose toil is undervalued. We have thousands of them and millions of them in America today. The mother who fears for the nourishment of her children. The aged man that is cast out by a society that prizes only youth and profit. That is America today. America is not a country for old people. It is not. Very few young people, I don't even know any, maybe some of you do, and if you do, please let me know in the comment section. But I was recently very impacted by a young man who he's originally, he wrote me a letter, and he's originally from the island of Cuba. He's of white race, and he was living in Europe, and he has European origins. And he decided to leave Europe, to leave the European Union, leave all that so-called prosperity, just to take care of his grandmother. And I was so touched by that letter. I don't know of any, I'm sure there are, but I am saying to you, it is very rare that in today's United States of America, there would be young people who would be willing to sacrifice their material comfort to go and take care of their grandparents. I don't know of any, unfortunately. You might know, but I do not know of any. And these are not mere statistics or faceless masses. They are the flesh and blood of our communities. The living proof that a society without charity and order is but a house built on sand. And in ages past, when reason was rightly subordinated to faith, because faith and reason go hand in hand, by the way, unlike what you've been taught in the schools by liars, when authority was embraced as a sacred heart, as a sacred trust, indeed, rather than a burden to be flung off, societies flourished. Not because of unrestrained, ridiculous individualism, but because of a shared commitment to to God's justice and mercy. The father provided for his household, not merely as an economic agent, but as a moral guardian. The ruler legislated not for gain, but for the common person. The people recognized that their duties transcended their desires. I insist on this, up until the 19th century, that was the standard, even in the United States, where we've always been known to be a little bit more individualistic because of the character of our country. We are. You have to understand, those of us who come from the pioneers, right? I am a pioneer spirit myself, so I don't say this lightly. Our ancestors, if you have ancestors in America that came in the 17th and 18th century, they were pioneers. They were very individualistic in the positive sense of the word. They were rugged individualists who conquered savage. This was savage land. I know some of you don't like to hear that term. They say, oh, the Native Americans. No, the Native Americans, by the way, that's a new term. They were called Indians. They're called Indians, the Redskins. Native American was a term that was reserved for people of mostly of colonial stock born in the United States. Some of you don't like to hear that because you're ignorant, because you'd rather hear the politically correct lie. If you read any American history book published up until the early 1950s, the term Native American meant someone who was a descendant of the settlers, of the colonials, not an Indian. But of course, some of you don't like to hear, oh, the Native Americans were oppressed. Go away. You're not even a Christian. You don't understand what the biblical mandates are. And today, the sirens of progress, so-called, it's not really progress. There could be no progress in Marxism. But the sirens of progress, they sing a different tune. That the market, and these are not Marxists, by the way, these are called free marketeers, that the market can be unburdened by conscience. And it shall arrange all things, that the worth of a man is measured by his productivity alone. That welfare is a charity to be minimized rather than a right to be secured. Because, you see, what happened was, in the 20th century, we confused what proper welfare is, and we gave it to the undeserving poor. There is such a thing as the undeserving poor in the church. So that is why, and I understand why, the term welfare today has such a negative connotation. It is negative because there's a lot of people receiving welfare who don't deserve it. But tell me, where is the justice in a society like ours that treats people as mere cogs in a machine to be discarded when worn? There's no morality in that either. Where is the mercy in a political system? Those of you who don't have vocabulary, polity means political entity. I know they don't teach vocabulary in the schools anymore, but I'm still going to use the proper words. That permits mothers to beg in silence and the infirm to perish without aid of any kind. Even the churches today, I say this as a Protestant, it pains me because many churches will not help anyone at all. And these are not questions for the faint-hearted. For the answers demand more than words. They demand action, rooted in an order older than these revolutions, wiser than these humanistic ideologies. An order that recognizes the universal destination of goods. That is to say, the principle that the earth's bounty is intended for all of the people of God, not just necessarily the fortunate few. And it is this principle, this godly principle, that compels us to demand proper wages for an honest day, for an honest pay, for an honest day's work. That was a phrase from our ancestors, you see. Fair treatment and social measures that secure the dignity of every family. And let's be clear, these measures are not mere concessions. It's not about conceding to sentimentality or political expediency. They are the outgrowth of a moral vision in which the rights of man are not empty abstractions as the French would have it, or the socialists would have it, but sacred trusts conferred by divine justice. And in this vision, the ability to work, to rest, to get nourishment, to education, properly understood, not brainwashing like you have today, to health. These are not privileges to be begged for, but these are recognitions of the dignity of the human being to be defended by the vigilant hand of ecclesiastical authority and exercised in charity. And yet, even as this vision flourishes in the heart of those of us who cherish true order, it is assailed on all sides by voices that demand freedom without responsibility, rights without duties, and liberty without law. How preposterous is that? And they proclaim the triumph of the individual will over the claims of family and community, over the claims of the church even, and turning man into an isolated island and society into a battlefield of competing interests. But the truth is immutable. A society so convinced is not a society at all. It is a ruinous chaos where the bonds that hold men together dissolve, and we get the rotten globalist porridge that gives us nothing more than unsettled stomachs and bowel afflictions. It's disgusting to look at our cities today. But now we have to talk about order and the true liberty on the sacred bonds of society. So let us speak frankly of the marketplace, that oft vaunted altar of modernity, where men place their hopes and fears, their fortunes and futures. And it is called, some people refer to it as the Temple of Liberty. And yet it can become a den of ravenous wolves, tearing at the flesh of the meek and feeble. Unregulated, it elevates wealth above virtue, competition above charity, profit above justice. It knows no conscience but the ledger, no mercy but the bottom line. And yet, the true custodian of society must not be fooled by such false gods. The common good demands that the state exercise its rightful authority, not to oppress, but to guide, and not to plunder, but to protect. The wages of the laborer must be just. The Bible says it. Not because of sentiment or whim, but because God himself, in his laws, in his justice, demands it. The family must be safeguarded, not merely by words, but by laws and customs that honor its sacred role. And yet, beware the distant powers. We know who they are. I can't mention them today. But you know who they are, those merchants of global commerce and industry who, cloaked behind their gilded facades and foreign banners, they seek to bend sovereign labor to their inscrutable designs. And such forces, detached from the hearth and native soil, because they are a citizen of nowhere, and they imperil the prosperity born of rightful toil and threaten to rend asunder the ancient blood bonds that hold a people true. And here, my dear brethren, we confront a great mystery and a great charge, that the goods of this earth, though they are possessed by some in stewardship, are not private fiefdoms to be exploited at will, but they are trusts held for the benefit of all the people of God. And this truth, that is at once radical and ancient, compels a profound humility, a recognition that personal ambition must yield to the demands of charity and justice. And the ruler must not be an unaccountable corporate tyrant, but a father of the nation. And the businessman, not a despot, but a servant. The citizen, not a mere consumer, but a participant in the sacred order. And this requires, yes, proper laws. It demands the protection of the vulnerable. And some recoil at this because they fear the specter of tyranny. But I tell you, the absence of order is far worse than its presence. For unbridled freedom is but the freedom to destroy. To govern rightly is not to snuff out liberty, but to secure it. It is to create the conditions under which families may flourish, workers may prosper, and communities may endure. We've never been as oppressed. There's never been such a tyrant age as today. All these little micro prohibitions on everything. You can't do this. Can't smoke. Can't drink. You can't do anything. And the state, properly understood, you can't say this, by the way. Racist. Discrimination. You can't speak your mind these days. But we are, when a state is properly understood, that is a state constituted under God's laws, then it is not the enemy of liberty, but its guardian. Not the oppressor, but the protector. And the highest office of government is the promotion of the common good, the welfare of the whole, without which the parts cannot thrive. And now let us turn our gaze to the education. We have to talk about it, the education of the young, that sacred trust upon which the future of every nation depends. And it is a grave error. No, it's really a calamity, I should say, to surrender this charge to the whim of the crowd or the market's indifferent hand. They call it the invisible hand. It's so preposterous. And education is not a mere transaction. It is a commodity to be bought and sold at will. It is the shaping of souls, the molding of character, the planting of virtues that shall bear fruit for generations. In the days of old, the school was a sanctuary where you had the wisdom of the ages, was imparted not only through letters and numbers, but through the teaching of morals, faith, and discipline. And today, alas, we witness the disintegration of this sacred trust, and education is often reduced to the mere, and I'm being very generous with this, the transmission of information, stripped of its higher purpose, severed from the roots of tradition and reverence. But a society without such education is like a ship without a rudder, tossed upon the sea of capriciousness and ignorance. And hence, it is the solemn duty of those who govern to uphold and protect the right of parents, by the way, to choose the proper nurture of their children, to preserve schools that honor the true end of education, that cultivate not only the mind, but the heart and soul. And let no man be deceived by the claim that freedom means abandoning this duty to the vagaries of the market, whatever that means, or the dictates of the majority. True freedom is the freedom to be rightly educated, to be formed in virtue and truth. And it is therefore a just and necessary act of government to aid such institutions to provide the means by which education may be preserved and extended to all worthy children, without surrender to the forces of corruption and mediocrity. And what can we say of health? That precious gift which sustains our labor and enjoyment. Shall it be left to chance, to the cold calculus of profit and loss? Or shall it be recognized as a Christian duty, the protection of which is a solemn obligation? A society that honors its members must provide care for the sick, to succor the disabled, and protection for the vulnerable. This is not an act of charity alone, but an expression of God's justice. The recognition that the well-being of each is bound to the welfare of all. And in these things, the hand of the church must be active as a vigilant guardian. And so permit me then to, we're getting towards the end, to address the troubling notion that the individual's rights exist in some kind of splendid isolation, unburdened by duties or obligations to his fellow man. And such a notion, as seductive as it may appear to some of you, is the very poison that dissolves the bonds of society and sows the seeds of its ruin. Because rights are not wild stallions to be ridden into chaos. They are the fruits of duty fulfilled, the harvest of a well-ordered soul. And to demand rights without duties is to demand the fruits without planting the seed. And what are these duties? They are many and noble. The duty to provide for one's family, to labor honestly, to respect authority, God-given authority, to cherish truth, to uphold justice, and above all, as the Bible says, to love one's neighbor as oneself, properly understood. It's not a hippie kind of love. And without such duties, rights become hollow echoes, empty slogans that mask a profound selfishness. Some of the most selfish people you will ever meet today are people who call themselves social justice warriors. They are some of the most narcissistic, selfish people you will ever meet. Some of them are downright disgusting individuals. And yet this age tells us otherwise, that rights are absolute, that duties are oppressive, and that each man is a law unto himself. This doctrine is the handmaiden of discord, the herald of anarchy. For a society, when duties are cast aside, is a ship without a rudder. You have a house without a foundation. It is a place where freedom degenerates into license, and license into chaos. And so let us then remember the great lesson of history, that true liberty flourishes only under the sheltering canopy of order, discipline, and hierarchy. That the best government is not one that permits every whim, but one that guides all toward the common good. That the market must be regulated, that labor must be justly rewarded, that families must be protected, and that education and health, as I said earlier, are sacred trusts of the community. These are not burdens to be borne unwillingly, but blessings to be cherished. They are the architecture of a civilization that honors man's dignity and ensures his flourishing. And finally, let us cast our eyes heavenward and recall that all earthly order is but a faint reflection of a divine ordinance. The hierarchies we honor, the duties we cherish, the authority we obey, all find their origin and meaning in the eternal order established by our Creator. It is not by accident that the family mirrors the divine Trinity, that the state echoes the harmony of celestial spheres, and that authority descends from the throne of heaven itself. And to reject this order, to sever reason from faith, as some of you do, is to plunge into a darkness that devours hope and extinguishes joy. It is to wander in a wilderness of doubt and despair, seeking a freedom that is but a mirage. But to embrace it, to submit our wills to the higher law, to honor the bonds of family and society, to acknowledge the rightful place of authority and tradition, is to step into the light of true liberty. And true liberty, brethren, is not the license to do whatever pleases the moment. It is the freedom to do what is right, the power to cultivate virtue, the joy of living in harmony with the divine will. And in this liberty there is order. In this order there is peace. And in this peace there is the flourishing of man as God intended. Let those who would promise freedom without responsibility beware. For their promises are empty, their visions fleeting. That is why democracy, so-called their version of democracy, is failing right now. It will fail. We are living in an age of the end of this era, the end of an era. And let us instead champion a society built on the sacred pillars of justice, charity, and tradition. Let us defend the family as the heart of civilization, the state as the guardian of the common good, the Christian state, I mean, and the soul of man as the seat of divine truth. And in so doing, we reclaim not only our heritage, but our destiny. We stand not as isolated individuals adrift on a sea of chaos, but as a people united by faith, order, and the solemn vow to uphold what is good, true, and beautiful. And go forth then, my friends, with courage and conviction, bearing this vision as a lamp in the darkness. For it is in this ancient and holy order that the light of liberty shines brightest, and the soul of man finds its true home. May God bless every single one of you. Praise God that I have you. And if you agreed with this message, I ask you to please, the only way that we can continue in this mission is for you to subscribe. So I ask you please to subscribe to the channel. Please show your support for the channel so that I can continue, God willingly, to share these messages with you all. Thank you all. May God empower every single one of you, and may we fight back against the the onslaught and against the enemies of our faith. Thank you.